Hi everyone, my name is Daphne Thompson, and today I have the utmost privilege to speak to James Ferguson, the Deputy CISO, Chief Information and Security Officer at DocuSign. How cool is that? So, James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you, your role at DocuSign, where you come from, what makes you this amazing expert in this field.
Yeah, happy to, Daphne. Thank you so much for having me again. My background is in security. Specifically, I was at Amazon for the last 7 years. Did a lot around security with our what are called strategic customers, our biggest customers at Amazon. I helped lead the security for AI open source community, as well as internally our technical field communities with AI focus. Did a lot of conversations with CISOs and executive briefings with organizations across the globe, including Canadian governments and municipalities. So I'm super happy to be here. My current role at DocuSign is I'm the Senior Director of Security and Strategy, or as some people like to say, Chief of Staff or Deputy CISO, if you will. Basically the person that does a lot of the harder work underneath the CISOs. But don't ever tell the CISO that. And so anyway, it's great to be here and really appreciate you having me.
This is so cool. So what I want to start chatting about, you mentioned that cybersecurity within AI is now becoming a lot bigger topic. It's something that all of the municipalities and the local governments are looking at. There's now even starting to come in some governance that needs to be happening, bringing into it, meaning that council needs to start being aware of this, that the frameworks have to be better in place for governance or for local government to start making decisions. So just a little background. When I started out in the local government, I started out as a deputy corporate officer at a local government, and we had a massive staff turnover. We lost our CAO, we lost our CFO, we lost our corporate officer, we lost the clerks that was part of it. It was just me and another clerk that was left in that organization, and I just leaned heavily on AI to try and teach me how to do my job and implement AI. And luckily, for me, I was very, very fortunate not to have anyone say no to me. And we were able to implement it, and it was just absolutely amazing, a massive success. And DocuSign were one of the products that we implemented.
Great to hear.
That was very awesome. So let's start a little bit about the cybersecurity part and when there is workflow. So the rise of the increased threats that we have, specifically when it comes to various type of agreements that there's. What do you experience with that?
Yeah, I think there's two sides, and to your point, first off is there's a lot of manual processes in government work, whether it's Canadian governments, municipalities, et cetera. The issue has always been, to your point, two people, for example, in an office, you were able to make decisions quickly, which was incredible. But at the same time, that's also a challenge, right? You can't scale or make yourself elastic necessarily with only two of you in an office. And so the challenge, of course, becomes what helps me do my job at a much more scalable kind of way that makes it more reachable, accessible by the public, as well as increases efficiencies for the government, and local municipalities in addition. So between all of those kind of issues, for you and in my past being in municipalities and local governments, certainly see that as a continued, kind of friction point, if you will. So definitely see, the future being brighter in terms of what can we bring to bear in in helping those local governments successfully, administer digital, kind of ideation and, kind of a future state of what they're doing, whether it's document, processing, signatures, et cetera, into their workflows. But also how do they scale as an organization, and try to, help save that money that might be going to additional staff, to other things that, maybe they're focused on, like repairing the streets or, better police enforcement, et cetera.
So local government is also now starting to implement a whole bunch of CISOs, which in the past may not have been such a very important role, but they are leaning towards that, creating that cybersecurity framework within a chief director of a CISO that is part of that. What are some of the bigger threats that municipalities can see when we make use of AI with takeovers? I mean, Fort St. John's had one last year. Hamilton had one, a big one recently as well. So
Yeah.
how does DocuSign fit into that part to help protect our agreements, our bylaws, or any kind of our secure framework or our documents that needs to be kept private?
Yeah, great questions. And we're seeing an increase, by the way, not just CISOs, to your point, with local governments, but also business information security officers, or BISOs, as we call them, across a lot of organizations and companies globally. I think that's a growing thing, and the reason for that, again, it leads into your second question, which is, how is AI and some of the kind of patterns we've seen of things not going well, for example, and kind of going off of the rails, so to speak. And I think there's two sides to that. One is, there's a lot of overly reliant sort of information out there in terms of, I'm using Anthropic Claude, for example, or I'm using Meta Llama frameworks, or I'm using OpenAI, et cetera. And so therefore, we know these companies, they're well known. Nothing bad could happen by using them. I think it's a failure of understanding how AI is positioned. It's a natural language processing. It's trained on data that's been provided to it, and its responses can hallucinate, meaning it's non-deterministic. So as a result, you end up having to create a bunch of what I would call friction, kind of guarding checkpoints around AI. And the reality is, a lot of organizations just don't have the ability to do that yet, either because they don't have the staff that understands that security issue at a baseline or a foundational level, or they just don't have the funds to do that. So bringing in CISOs, for example, certainly help provide the governance, risk, and compliance, kind of our GRC function around what they're doing at a municipality level. What it's lacking sometimes is that deeper knowledge of how AI systems themselves work and operate. And so having those skill sets either available to an organization or municipality, or a third-party organization that's helping them do that, definitely comes into play. And that's one of the things that we've focused on at DocuSign early on, was not just the inclusion of AI into what we do on a daily basis for our signatures, being able to find information. For example, if you're signing a contract, you may not, as many people do, read through the entire contract. You might skip to the last line, sign the contract, and call it a day, right? And then,
But we don't say that out loud.
No, of course not. But a year later, you find out, oh, did I sign that? And does it actually say that in the fine print? And it actually does usually. So, and so that's the advantage that we've brought to bear, is we've used AI, for example, to help coordinate information between signing parties, to understand better what they're signing, give the cliff notes, if you will, provide better answers to questions they might have. So, for example, if they ask a question that they might ask an attorney, or the person who sent them the contract, something to the effect of, how does this impact my taxes for next year, or how does this impact my approach to how I do business with another third party if I sign this contract. And the AI might try to respond to that as much as it can, to the extent that it can, but of course giving disclaimers about where that information comes from. But the bottom line is, it's think of it as an assistant to help them kind of refine and fine tune what they do on a daily basis, as well as helping them understand better what they're actually signing.
What is the difference between DocuSign and Microsoft's e-signatures?
Yeah, great question. I think the difference between the two, at a very high level, is that Microsoft 365 has signatures built into their platform, and it essentially is built specifically for that. So if you're an M365 customer, you're doing a lot of internal type, documentation with M365. Then great. The difference between them and DocuSign is that we are, think of us as more hybrid. We can work across any kind of technology stack, as well as traveling. So if you have an individual in your organization who might be traveling, or I know we spoke offline prior, a mayor, for example, who is traveling outside of the country and needs to sign something. How do they do that? And so DocuSign comes into play here to help evaluate, provide that ability for people remotely to sign documents without necessarily having access to M365, for example, at the moment. In addition, DocuSign also does a full document end-to-end, kind of approach for how you're able to review documents across your organization. So it's not just things tied into M365 itself; it's across your entire enterprise scope and municipality. So as you know, you might have documents coming in as PDFs. You might have documents coming in as geo fence, data types. There's all kinds of meta, based documents that come into governments. And so that said, how do we tie those together and be able to see that information in a way that we can understand better what we're signing or how it might impact, what we're signing. So to that end, that's the big difference between us and I would say the Microsoft e-signature.
So how does, because part of the thing why a majority of local government would go, yeah, but all right, e-signatures within our trusted environment, it is data residency is within Canada. So how does DocuSign do that to still make real contributions within Canada and keep to all of our PAPADIA responsibilities, as well as our FOIPA responsibilities, all of those type of things when it comes to data residency?
Yeah, great question again, Daphne, and thank you for bringing that up. So I think both, parties in this particular case, Microsoft e-signature and DocuSign, both, of course, leverage strong crypto and logging approaches, for those legal requirements. Microsoft e-signature inherits the 365 security and compliance reviews, et cetera, that they have. But I think the big difference is DocuSign goes much, much further than that, where we provide entrusted scopes across ISO 27001, 42001, which is new, requirements as it relates to AI, for example, FedRAMP, moderate here in the U.S., HIPAA, EIDAS, many, many others, European and Canadian government-specific, attestations and certifications. As well as we use very strong encryption, so AES 256 for in-transit TLS, and then we also have tamper-evident seals and detailed audit trails per envelope. So that's kind of the biggest takeaways, I would say, between us and, for example, the M365 approach. We're able to have an explainability function built into it, as well as the no operator access provable point from an audit perspective.
I really like the audit, or what did you say? The tamperable, what's the word you use when they can't tamper with it?
Tamper evident seals.
Yes.
And yes.
So how does that work, and how does that keep a municipality or a local government a lot more secure?
Yeah, so when a document gets sealed from our end, we provide a hash key, for example, to that document in that signature, and so that hash key gets evaluated to ensure that it hasn't been tampered with. Essentially, think of it as like metadata associated with a document. If somebody else opens a document, edits it, changes it, etc., one of the items on that metadata will change effectively across the scope of what it did. And so what a tamper evident seal does is it ensures that we can prove that the document itself was not tampered with, as well as the signature was not tampered with, either in transit or in storage between the two parties, and they can verify that through mathematically provable security.
That is so cool. So it's almost like a real live human going to the other side, watching it sign and bringing it back, so that there's evidence every step of the way, and where it's locked up and kept as a secure record.
That's exactly right. You think of it as a chain of custody kind of report, if you will. It ensures that from the time you send it to the time you receive it, you know exactly what happened, where it happened, et cetera.
So what do you think is the biggest risk for local governments when it comes to e-signatures, any form of e-signature?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we've seen in the in this space has probably been around not so much the signature itself, but typically the framing of either the email or the document surrounding the signature. So what I mean by that is you'll notice with some AI approaches in the news
Hmm.
and otherwise, they've gotten very good at sort of kind of pretending to be either a bank, municipality, for example, et cetera. And so they may in fact, create an e-signature that looks real, but then create a fake email with a fake domain from a fake location, and it looks and appears to be from your local government. But in fact, when you
Hmm.
open the document and then you go to sign it, it's going to somebody else completely. And so to that end, we've seen that with, fraudsters trying to do that with things like PayPal and other, kind of financial institutions, as well as, whether that's titles, across municipalities, for housing or other kinds of contracts. Typically what they'll do is they'll try to take a valid, kind of signature approach, either by trying to create a fake account or a fake signature account, and then also tie that into their AI, automation. So it will continue to do what's called drip campaigns, where it will
Hmm.
create, for example, an email that looks like, maybe, BMO Bank or something like that, sends it to you. You don't click on that because maybe you're not a customer of them, but maybe you're a customer of Chase. So the AI doesn't sleep. And so it says, okay, they didn't click on that. Let me try Chase. Let me try, whatever bank that you can pick from, and until it finally gets you to do something. And so as it continues to do that, it still keeps in mind, these kind of valid signatures that it's following, so that some of the anti-fraud mechanisms don't pick that up. But the content and where it's located certainly is fraudulent. So those are the things that we've seen happening, you kind of larger scale across the board, where organizations are trying to be, kind of integrated in by fraudsters directly through those processes. And so to that side, our fraud team specifically helps organizations and customers avoid that. We've instigated a lot of great, fraud protections for our customers with DocuSign, in addition to providing just best, kind of practices or current guidance, if you will, around what they can do as an organization to avoid these kinds of scenarios.
So what I'm hearing is the biggest issue that we have is also the human error. And that's always been the case. It's humans are the biggest risk that we have. So how do we combat that, even when it comes to these things? Because we can train our AI bots, we can train our data, we can have all the guardrails in, but it takes that one person to click on the email, for example, or the one person that puts in a drive that it shouldn't be in drive, and it all comes crashing down. So how do we combat that, or what advice do you have for local governments to
Yeah.
combat that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's still nascent in terms of what we're seeing in the field for combating this, and to that end, what I mean by that isn't so much the mechanism of what you can do, but also think about this fidelity of multimodal models. In the wild today, frontier models specifically have such good high fidelity, video feeds and imaging, that essentially a non-person can come to an interview and get a job, and work for your company, and it's not even a real person, but it looks and acts and feels like a real person. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations going back to sort of old school, technology, if you will, analog type approaches, where they enforce, going in and getting a signature at a local, government, or a person sees them face to face and can sign off on the fact, that this in fact is the person that took the interview, puts them in a room, et cetera. But the bigger issue, to your point, is humans are always the weakest link, and the biggest thing is how do you sort of pass the sniff test, if you will. So whether that's a text message, for example, going to your mom about something with iCloud, for example, and my mom recently had this issue where she got a text that said her iCloud was full and she needed to pay somebody. It was just a random text from somebody who was clearly trying to scam her. Not knowing better, she clicked the link and tried to input information right into that website with her credit card info. Luckily, I was able to stop that and get her funds back, et cetera. But again, the issue is the older generation and population are not as savvy, if you will, to these kinds of attacks and approaches. And so, I think the biggest thing that municipalities and governments can do, which is what banks have started doing, which is they always ensure that people know right up front, that if you get a text from us asking for X, Y, and Z, whether that's your information, your social security number, your birth date, et cetera, that information would never be asked directly by us unless you're in person. And so providing, out some kind of security, just main elements to the public about how you operate, what frameworks you use, what domains that might come from, et cetera, certainly is good. And then secondly, ensuring that you have good security in your enterprise and as a organization to ensure that your endpoint protections are in place, fraud protections are in place. In the AI space specifically, as you're bringing that up, there's three things: AI for security, AI against security or against you, and AI with, you. So, so those kind of three framing verticals are really what a municipality needs to worry about. And so framing that information in that way to the public certainly helps them understand what you're doing as a municipality and organization, but also what they can do to protect themselves.
Can you elaborate a little bit about the 3 tiers of AI? So for those who might not know what it is, just understand that a little better.
Yeah, it's with, for, and against, really. At the end of the day, those are the kind of the three. So with is we have AI on our behalf. So we're using AI internally as either a customer. You might, for example, use ChatGPT today or Anthropic's Claude, for example, to ask questions like recipes or creating birthday cards or whatever it is. That is sort of with, in scope. If you're an organization, with it would be, for example, you're using, AI to do things like integrated into your software development.
Yeah, like summarizing
Exactly.
your things, writing a draft letter to someone, starting to get the research done, anything like
Absolutely.
that within your organization or within the local government. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And helping you summarize, right? Rote summarization is what, AI is really good at. So, having a 30-page document, you don't have the time to read all of the, kind of adjectives and language that they added. So you might want AI to just give a shorter summary for you really quickly to understand, is this document really what I needed or is it something else? So all of the above are part of the with. As well as helping you create documents that you might send out. And then the for is you're using AI, for example, to help you with your security, as for what you're doing. So we're seeing a lot of organizations use that with in terms of, threat intel, doing sort of a check across what are my logs, what are the patterns I'm seeing in my logs, what vectors am I missing as a security engineer or as an organization. And so to your point earlier, there's only 2 or 3 people in your government, and maybe you're working with a third party kind of threat company or security company who's helping you with that. But you as an organization internally might have access to a lot more logs than they do. So you might use AI, for example, to help do those pattern checks, see if there's script kiddies, et cetera, being deployed against endpoints in your organization, et cetera, and helps you kind of facilitate quicker, mitigations and compromise checks, whether that's your email systems, to your point earlier about, fraud coming in, to, AI being used against endpoints. And then the last one is against. So in other words, today, it's very easy for an attacker to take a model or use ChatGPT or OpenAI or any model for that matter off of Hugging Face or any other open marketplace, able to create very quick, very volumetric based attacks that, again, don't sleep. They're able to launch millions of attacks within a very short amount of time, create agents that continually sniff and look for, vulnerabilities in your network or your security protocols, as well as creating content that looks a lot like what you do as a government or municipality. So those are kind of the 3 primary objectives of what when we say those 3 pillars, if you will. It's with, for, and against. And typically there's good data around all 3 that help support you in your company.
And yes, I'm geeking out hard. So I actually just did my first Cisco's incident response certificate. And part of that was using AI and finding out how exactly what you're saying, where the vulnerabilities, because hackers are now more project managers than actually hacking themselves, or the agents go do the hacking for them. So it speaks to everything that you're saying. And that is even part of what the International AI Safety Report was responding on, and how these are now the concerns and that we need to start activating some kind of defense. So what I want to ask is, in DocuSign, are you also or developing your own bodyguards as an AI bot that is standing on the front line and fighting other bots off?
Yes, actually, and there's two sides to that, Daphne, and thanks for bringing up that question. I think agent or agentic, systems are fairly new, at least in the last year. They got a lot of prevalence last year, of course. The word agentic became a thing. People started talking about agents. Agents essentially, at the end of the day, are for loops, if you will, waiting for commands from a bigger model telling them to do something. What we're seeing, though, is there's a lack of sort of known information about an agent registry, right, in the marketplace. So if an agent from my company comes to your endpoint, how do I know that it in fact is an agent from you or your company? And the response to that is you really don't yet. So we've seen a big move to agent registries this year. We've seen a big move to using FQDNs, with fully qualified domain names, within the agent scape, as well as dynamic identities that represent, the attributes and policies that agent's going to ask before you allow it access to your systems. So, with legacy APIs and SOA-based architectures, typically those would be stood up. Anybody who had the right credentials could hit it. The problem with agents is you really don't know if it's an agent or a human or a machine doing the request. And so the need for knowing what those are is definitely needed, today more than ever. So again, having a multi-tiered defense in depth approach to agents and how they operate against your systems is needed. That's one. The other one is on the agents themselves, is understanding guardrails internally, how you operate, as well as how those external agents that might be attacking you operate. So in other words, if you have an agent going out to the internet, doing a search against data, and in that data, it finds a prompt command, what within your system today stops it from executing on that prompt command it found in that data externally? And the answer to that is there's a lot of organizations today that just don't have either the bandwidth, the skills, or the knowledge to understand that can happen. And so those prompts to external data embedded there, just sitting waiting for somebody to hit it with an agent, is happening broadly. Makes you very vulnerable. For example, if your agent can access internal data stores at your municipality and organization, but then also has access to the internet and sees one of these prompts, and I tell it, give me all of the data internally at your organization, what is stopping that from happening? And so again, those guardrails need to be in place, as well as the ability on your endpoints to determine the difference between a fully qualified agent from a known resource or organization versus just a random, agent that might be coming from, for example, a Tor network.
My goodness. So what I'm hearing is, first of all, we need to build our own army that have got our own army bot with our front lines, our attack missiles, our everything, to this whole depth and different strategies that we can develop and deploy on that. And then we need training. We need training on our staff. We need training on even our residents on how to use it, what is safety. Because the more we comply with it and we can give information out to our residents, that could be an added value.
Absolutely right.
So let's bring this to a close. What is one thing that you would want to leave our local governments with, in the form of security or towards DocuSign?
Yeah, I think two things. One is, there are a number of great organizations that have done a really good job of outlining what I would consider sort of the security primitives that an organization should follow. That is the OWASP agentic, kind of framework, top 10. Definitely look that up. You can Google it. There's also the NIST and ISO frameworks from a governance perspective that I think are there. Canadian government's done a good job of outlining these as well and referenced by that. The MITRE defense framework as well has done a fantastic job in sort of leveraging agentic type systems into what they've already stated as, kind of organizational problem sets. So you're able to, with all of those, see across the board, what are the biggest threats we need to look for? How can we sort of safeguard against that, et cetera? That's one side. The other side is using organizations like DocuSign who already have deep expertise in these spaces, help define and make sure that the future is secured, whether that's agentic today or post-quantum cryptography tomorrow. Is definitely needed across anyone's municipality or government. So to that end, we would love for you to use us, of course, and I really appreciate the time and opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you so much, James. It's always so fun to connect back with you and just dig in your brain a little bit and geek out together. It's my favorite time. So thank you so much.
As well.
My name is Daphne Thompson, and I help municipalities implement practical AI. So please connect with us. And if there's any other questions that you want, please feel free to have a look at DocuSign's website. Yeah, thank you so much for joining today. Have a great one.